The hallway smelled like floor polish and sweat, the kind of smell that clings to high school walls long after the final bell. I was 17. My mind was on practice, not on pain. I had my USC scholarship letter tucked inside my locker, the edges worn from how many times I'd unfolded and refolded. It was more than paper. It was a ticket out of the noise, out of the doubts, out of Long Beach. I remember thinking, this is it, Brian. You're almost there. Then my phone buzzed. A text from her. She said she wanted to talk, privately. I didn't think much of it. She'd been friendly, maybe flirty, but nothing serious. I walked down to where she said to meet, the side of the school where the cameras didn't quite reach. She was waiting, nervous, kept glancing around. We talked, nothing heavy. Then she said she had to go. That was it. 10 minutes, maybe less. But by the end of the day, everything I'd ever known would be gone. I was in the middle of drills when the campus officer showed up. His face was blank, too blank. He said, "Brian Banks? Come with me." I thought it was about grades or something minor. But the moment we stepped outside, 2 police cruisers were waiting. Doors open, sirens off, silent and serious. "What's going on?" I asked. They didn't answer. One grabbed my arm. Another reached for the cuffs. I froze. The field around me blurred. Teammates stared, helmets in hand. Coach yelled something I couldn't hear. The metal was cold around my wrists. The words hit next, sharp, brutal, final. "You're under arrest for rape." The air left my body. What? I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. That's not possible. They read me my rights. Voices flat like they'd said it 1,000 times before. I looked around for someone, anyone, to step in to say you got the wrong guy. But no one did. I saw my mother running from the parking lot, screaming my name. She was crying before she even reached me. The cops pushed her back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was my life unraveling. The interrogation room was cold, too bright. They asked me the same questions in different ways, trying to trap me, twist me, make me confess to something that never happened. "Did you meet her?" "Yes." "Did you touch her?" "No." "She says you forced her." "She's lying." Each answer felt like shouting into a void. The detective leaned in close, eyes heavy with judgment. "She's 16, Brian. She's crying. Who do you think they'll believe?" I stayed silent. My stomach turned. I'd always believed in fairness, that if you told the truth, things would work out. That belief died in that room. They took me to county jail that night. The sound of the door closing, that iron slam, is something you never forget. I sat on the hard bench, staring at the floor. Every second stretched like a lifetime. I thought about my mother, probably pacing, praying. I thought about the football field, the scholarship, the future. And I thought about the girl, the one who just set fire to my life. I tried to remember everything. Every word, every glance. Nothing made sense. But in the eyes of the law, sense didn't matter. She had a story. I had a record. A black kid from Long Beach with potential, but no power. The trial came fast, too fast. My lawyer, a public defender, told me the truth I didn't want to hear. They don't need evidence, Brian. They just need her word. But she's lying. He nodded. I know. But juries don't always care about the truth. You're facing 41 years. 41 years. The number didn't even sound real. Then came the offer. If you plead no contest, you could be out in 6. 6 years. Or risk 41. My mother cried when I told her I might take the deal. Baby, don't say you did something you didn't do. I couldn't look her in the eyes. But I was 17, scared, cornered, and tired. So I said the words that broke me. I'll take the deal. That night, they took me away. No goodbyes. No explanations. As the van pulled off, I watched the world shrink behind me. My school, my city, my dreams, all fading into darkness. I remember whispering to myself, it's not over. Somehow I'll prove it. But I didn't know how. Not yet. When the gates clanged shut behind me, the noise of the prison swallowed everything. Men shouted. Doors slammed. Chains rattled. I was inmate #J21458 now. Not Brian Banks, just a number. My first night, I lay on a thin mattress staring at the ceiling. The air smelled of metal and bleach. I thought of the girl who'd lied, sleeping peacefully in her own bed, while I was here, stripped of everything I'd worked for. And for the first time, I felt something darker than pain. I felt anger. Not wild or loud, but quiet, focused, cold. I made a promise that night, not out of rage, but out of resolve. You took 6 years from me, I whispered into the dark. When I get out, I'll take back everything, the truth, my name, my future. That was the beginning, the day my life ended, and my fight began. The clang of a cell door is not a sound you ever get used to. It doesn't just close you in, it tells you what you are now. Not a son, not an athlete, not a dreamer, just a number waiting for the next count. My first cellmate was a man twice my age with eyes that never stopped moving. He asked me what I was in for. When I said rape, he laughed, low and bitter. Everybody in here innocent, he said. You'll learn. That laugh followed me for weeks. I wanted to scream that I was telling the truth, but in prison, innocence is just another story people don't believe. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the sounds, the metal echo of boots, someone crying 3 cells down, the pop of a distant fight. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, I dreamed of open fields and sunlight, then woke up to gray concrete and a sky cut by bars. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Time lost shape. It's not like in movies where prisoners mark lines on the wall. You stop counting because numbers start to hurt. The first rule I learned, keep your head down. The second, find something, anything to believe in. I started doing push-ups until my arms burned. I told myself I'd walk out stronger, faster, sharper. But strength didn't stop the ache in my chest every time I thought of my mother. She visited whenever she could, wearing that brave smile that fooled no one. Keep praying, baby, she'd say. God knows the truth. I nodded, though some nights I wasn't sure I believed anymore. The worst moments were when mail came. The guards would shout out names. Every time they skipped mine, it felt like being erased again. One day I got a letter from USC. Not words of support, just a notice, scholarship withdrawn. I read it twice, then tore it up slowly, piece by piece. That was the day the dream finally died. Months later, I saw her face again, on a small TV in the common room. She was crying, surrounded by microphones. Reporters called her brave. They said she was suing the school for failing to protect her. I watched, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. They gave her money. They gave her sympathy. They gave her the life that should have been mine. The rage was a storm inside me, but even storms have to rest. After a while, the anger turned into something else, clarity. If no one was going to fight for me, I'd learn how to fight for myself. So I started reading law books, case files, anything I could get. I read about wrongful convictions, DNA exonerations, false testimonies. I realized I wasn't alone. There were thousands of us buried alive by words that weren't true. I wrote letters to lawyers, journalists, innocence projects. Most never wrote back. A few did, kindly but firmly. We can't take your case right now. Still, each envelope I sent felt like a punch against the wall that caged me. One afternoon, a new counselor named Justin joined the facility. He was younger than most staff, wore glasses, and treated inmates like people instead of statistics. He noticed I spent hours in the tiny prison library. You studying law? He asked. Trying to figure out how to save my own life? I said. He smiled sadly. Then start with patience. You can't fight a system if you let it break your spirit first. Those words stayed with me. So I began rebuilding, not my reputation, but my mind. I took every self-help course they offered. I mentored new inmates who were close to giving up. Each day became a test of endurance, a quiet rebellion against despair. It was in my 5th year when hope whispered again. A man named Roderick, who worked in the legal aid office, told me about a case where a prisoner had secretly recorded his accuser's confession. It got the man exonerated. Could that work for me? I asked. Maybe, he said, if you can find her and if she talks. The idea lodged itself in my mind like a spark refusing to die. I didn't know how, but I swore I'd find a way to reach her once I was free. Because freedom, to me, wasn't walking out of the gates. Freedom was hearing her say the words that could wipe the dirt off my name. 6 years. That's how long it took. The day they released me, the sky looked too bright, too wide. My mother was waiting, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me. You're home, she said. But I didn't feel home. I felt like a ghost returning to a world that had moved on without me. Every job interview ended the same way. Smiles at first, then silence once they saw the record. Sorry, we can't hire someone with that history. History. As if the lie had become part of who I was. One night, I sat in my tiny room, staring at the ceiling, the same way I did in prison. Only this time, I wasn't powerless anymore. I had learned the system. I had learned patience. I still had that spark. I pulled out a notebook and wrote 4 words across the top of the page. Clear. My name. Completely. That would be my revenge. Not violence. Not hate. But truth. Loud enough to make the whole world listen. Freedom. That's what they called it when they opened the gates and told me to go home. But what they gave me wasn't freedom. It was survival in a world that still saw me as a monster. Everywhere I went, the word followed me like a ghost. Sex offender. A label that poisoned job applications, friendships, even the way people looked at me on the street. 6 years in prison had taken enough, but this invisible prison was worse. Because here, everyone smiled while judging you. I remember the first time I tried to apply for work. It was at a warehouse not far from home. The manager was friendly, until he reached the criminal history section on the form. He looked up slowly. Is this true? My throat tightened. I was wrongfully convicted. He gave a polite nod. I'm sorry, son. We can't take chances. That phrase, we can't take chances, became the echo of my days. Even neighbors whispered when I walked past. Parents pulled their kids closer. One afternoon, as I stood outside a grocery store, I saw my reflection in the window. Not the boy who dreamed of the NFL. Not the son my mother raised. Just a man hollowed out by lies. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, in purpose. They stole my truth. I whispered to the reflection. I'm taking it back. I started researching day and night. The small public library became my second home. I read everything about post-conviction relief, exonerations, and recording laws. That's when I stumbled upon a case. A man in another state had secretly recorded his accuser admitting the crime never happened. The recording set him free. My pulse quickened. Could I do the same? But how? I didn't know where she was. I hadn't heard her name in years. Only what I'd seen on the news, when she smiled and spoke about her trauma. That smile haunted me. It wasn't the smile of guilt. It was the smile of someone who'd gotten away with it. So I made a plan. Simple, risky, but clear. Find her. Confront her. Get the truth. Finding her wasn't easy. She'd moved, changed numbers, deleted social accounts. But lies leave traces. Through an old mutual friend, I learned she still lived nearby. Quieter life now, but still spending the settlement money she got from suing the school district. $2.6 million. That's what my life had cost. That's what she got for destroying it. I rehearsed what I'd say if I saw her again. I imagined her denial. I imagined walking away with nothing. But there was one thing I knew. If she'd lied once, she'd lie again, and somewhere in her words, the truth would slip out. I reached out to a private investigator, a man who'd once helped with wrongful conviction cases. He wasn't cheap, but he believed me. I can find her, he said. But once I do, what's your move? My move, I said quietly. I want her to admit it. On tape. He raised an eyebrow. That's revenge. I shook my head. No, that's redemption. Weeks passed before the investigator called. Got her, he said. She's in town. Seems to be doing fine. I sat there, phone trembling in my hand. 6 years of anger and grief boiled beneath the surface, but I forced it down. I couldn't go at her with rage. I had to go with strategy. So I sent a message through a mutual acquaintance. Casual, careful. Told her I wanted to talk, that I'd moved on and just wanted closure. Surprisingly, she agreed. We arranged to meet at a small cafe off the main street. That morning, I could barely breathe. I checked the small recording device in my pocket 3 times before leaving home. Every step toward that cafe felt like walking into a storm I'd waited years to face. When I arrived, she was already there, older, maybe wiser, but still recognizable. She looked nervous. I smiled politely. Thanks for meeting me, I said. She nodded, eyes darting around. I didn't expect to hear from you. Yeah, well, I said. A lot's happened. We talked about life, the years lost. I kept my tone calm, my voice steady. Then I asked the question I've been waiting to ask for years. Why did you do it? She froze. Do what? You know what? Silence stretched between us. Her eyes filled with something, shame, maybe fear. Then, barely above a whisper, she said the words that would change everything. It didn't happen. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. What did you say? She swallowed hard. I was scared, okay? I made it up. I didn't know what else to do. And then my mom. She pushed me to keep the story. Then the money came, and I couldn't go back. The room spun. Part of me wanted to yell, to make her feel what I felt. But I stayed silent, because the recorder was still running. When I left the cafe, my legs felt weak. I stood outside, staring at the sunlight. For the first time in years, the world looked real again. I had it. Her confession. The truth. I wanted to run, to shout, but instead I walked home, heart steady, hands shaking only when I pressed stop on the recorder. That night, I called a lawyer, one of the few who had once written back to me. He listened quietly as I explained. Then I played him the audio. When it ended, there was silence on the line. Then he said, "Brian, this changes everything." He connected me with the California Innocence Project. Within days, their team was reviewing my case, their excitement barely contained. "We can file for exoneration," they said. "This is the proof we needed." For the first time in 6 years, the word hope didn't sound like a trap. It took months of filings, hearings, and court sessions. Every appearance was like reopening an old wound, but this time I had armor, the truth. When the day came, I sat in the courtroom, the same place that had once sentenced me. But this time I wasn't the accused. I was the survivor. The judge listened to the recording, listened to her voice admitting it never happened. And when he finally looked up, his tone softened. "Mr. Banks," he said, "you are hereby exonerated of all charges." The gavel came down like thunder. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed for the first time, fully, deeply, freely. Reporters surrounded me outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed. "How you feel, Brian?" they asked. I smiled faintly, like the truth finally found its voice. But it wasn't enough. 6 years of my life were gone. 6 years I could never get back. I wanted more than freedom. I wanted accountability. So I filed a civil lawsuit, not for revenge, but for balance. The state had to know what their system did to people like me. I spoke out on national TV, exposing the cracks that swallowed men whole. And when the woman who lied was ordered to repay every cent of her settlement, $2.6 million, I didn't celebrate. I just nodded, because justice, when it finally comes, doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like peace. That night, I sat with my mother in our living room. She held my hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "We did." Outside, the world was quiet. Not because it had changed, but because I had. The cage was gone. The truth was free. And I was finally completely Brian Banks again. When I walked out of that halfway house in the summer of 2011, the sky looked impossibly wide. Too wide. Like it hadn't noticed that I'd been gone for 6 years. I stood there with my little box of belongings, the same sneakers I'd gone in with, cracked and yellowing, a faded photo of my mom, and the papers that branded me as sex offender. 6 years had passed, and yet the world had moved on without me. My friends were married now. My teammates were either in the NFL or done with football. Even the field where I used to train was gone, bulldozed to make way for a shopping complex. I had no job, no degree, no reputation, just a record that followed me everywhere I turned, and a deep, unyielding anger that refused to die. For a while, I tried to live quietly. My parole officer warned me not to stir trouble. "Stay clean, Brian. Keep your head down," he said. But keeping my head down was exactly what had destroyed me before. I had done what they told me, stayed quiet, signed the papers, accepted the label. Not anymore. I needed the truth to be heard, not whispered behind closed doors or trapped in old court files. I wanted the world to know what she did. It began with a phone call I almost didn't take. A friend from high school messaged me out of the blue. "Bro, you remember Winetta? She's been asking about you." I froze. My stomach turned to ice. Why would she be asking about me? My first instinct was rage. The thought of hearing her voice again made my chest tighten. But then, curiosity slipped in. What could she possibly want after all this time? I told him to give her my email. A few days later, a message appeared in my inbox. Subject: Hey stranger. The tone was casual, almost playful, like she hadn't detonated my life and watched it burn. She said she wanted to catch up, that she missed how close we'd been, that she wanted to make peace. Peace. I stared at the screen for a long time, trembling. My mother came in and saw my face. What's wrong? She asked. She reached out. I said, my voice cracking. Her expression hardened instantly. Don't you dare talk to that girl again, Brian. Don't let her hurt you twice. But this time, I wasn't the scared boy who'd signed his life away. This time, I was a man who had nothing left to lose and the truth on his side. The next day, I contacted a private investigator named Justin Brooks, a calm, methodical man with sharp eyes and a reputation for overturning wrongful convictions. He ran something called the California Innocence Project. We met at a small cafe in Long Beach. I told him everything, how she'd lied, how my life had unraveled, how I had no way to prove it. He listened quietly, then asked, would you talk to her again? I hesitated. Only if it helps me clear my name. He nodded slowly. If she admits it on record, we can take that to court. We can undo this. Undo this. The words hit me like thunder. After all these years, someone was telling me there was a way out. That night, I agreed to meet her. We met in a park near the ocean, her choice. She showed up wearing designer sunglasses, her nails done, her smile bright, like she was the one who'd been wronged. Brian, she said softly, you look good. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she slept at night. But instead, I forced a tight smile. It's been a while. She nodded, twirling her hair. I've thought about you a lot. I wish things had gone differently. There was a silence, only the wind and the sound of kids playing nearby. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping. You know, I didn't want to ruin your life. It was just everything got so big. My mom, the lawyers, the school, they all pushed me. My heart stopped. You're saying it didn't happen? I asked, my voice shaking. She bit her lip. You know it didn't. But if I admit that now, I lose everything. The money, the support. That was it. The words I've been waiting 6 years to hear. But she didn't know that Justin had given me a small recorder hidden in my sleeve. Every word she said was being captured. Every lie. Every confession. While I walked away that day, the ocean looked different. For the first time, the waves didn't sound like they were mocking me. They sounded like applause. The legal process that followed was brutal, but this time it was my fight. Justin and his team worked day and night, building the case, cross-checking timelines, and presenting the recording to the district attorney's office. Weeks later, I stood before the same kind of courtroom that had stolen my youth. Only now, the power dynamic had shifted. The DA's voice was steady as she spoke. Based on the new evidence, the state of California moves to vacate the conviction of Brian Banks. The judge adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the file. Then, after a pause that lasted a lifetime, he looked up. Mr. Banks, he said, you are a free man. I didn't hear the applause that followed. I just felt my knees give out. 6 years. 6 years of darkness, humiliation, and despair. Gone in an instant. My mother rushed to me, sobbing, her hands clutching my face. You're free, baby. You're free. And for the first time in over a decade, I believed her. But freedom wasn't enough. She had destroyed my life with one lie, walked away with $1.5 million in settlement money, and never spent a day behind bars. That wasn't justice. That was imbalance. So we filed a counterclaim, not just for defamation, but for malicious prosecution. We wanted her held accountable. Every penny she'd stolen returned. The court ruled that she repay $2.6 million to the school district she defrauded. Watching that verdict come down didn't make me smile. It didn't erase the years I'd lost, but it balanced something deep inside me, something that had been twisted and bleeding for far too long. Then came the redemption. USC called. They wanted me to train again, not because they owed me anything, but because they saw something in me, a man who refused to die quietly. I wasn't the same athlete anymore. My legs ached, my stamina was gone, but my spirit burned hotter than it ever had. And on that field, under the Californian sun, I felt whole again. Reporters asked if I hated her. if I wanted revenge. I told them, revenge got me through the cage. Justice got me out. But forgiveness, that's what keeps me free. Years later, when I speak at schools or prisons, I see young men sitting where I once was, hopeless, angry, broken. I tell them my story, not to gain sympathy, but to remind them that even after the worst injustice, your name can rise again, that the truth has a pulse, and that one man's redemption can echo louder than one woman's lie. The first morning after my exoneration, I woke up expecting to see the same cracked concrete ceiling of my cell. For a second, my body forgot it was free. I jumped out of bed at 5 a.m., automatically reaching for clothes I didn't have anymore, gray prison issue, numbers stitched into the fabric. Then I saw sunlight pouring through my window. Real sunlight, not the filtered kind that slides through barbed wire and dusty glass. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. Freedom, I realized, has a scent. Fresh air, grass after rain, hope. But what they don't tell you is that after you're freed, life doesn't automatically fall back into place. You don't just pick up where you left off. You rebuild, one painful, humbling brick at a time. I started with the gym, the same one where I used to train back in high school. The owner, an old friend, let me work out after hours. My body was stiff, my muscles weak, but I trained like a man possessed, not to chase the NFL dream anymore, but to prove to myself that I could rise again. Every rep, every sprint was a war against the voice in my head that whispered they took too much from you. You'll never catch up, but I kept going. Sometimes, after midnight, I'd stand alone on that field, staring up at the floodlights. That used to be my stage, the place where I believed my future began. And now, it was my sanctuary. The air was quiet, but inside, I felt something stirring. Purpose. When the news broke, Brian Banks exonerated after 6 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, lawyers, talk shows. They all wanted to know how I felt. How do you rebuild after losing everything? Do you forgive your accuser? What does justice mean to you now? At first, I didn't have the words. I was tired of talking about pain, but I realized my silence had cost me before. This time, my voice could make a difference. So I spoke. On stages, on television, in classrooms, in prisons. And every time I told my story, I felt the chains loosen a little more. In 2013, I got the call that changed everything. The Atlanta Falcons wanted me to come in for a tryout. I stared at the phone, not believing it. It wasn't about football anymore. It was about redemption, about reclaiming something that the world had said was lost. When I stepped onto that turf in Georgia, wearing a borrowed jersey, I felt like every step was a statement to the universe. You didn't break me. I didn't make the final roster. But when I walked off that field, reporters asked, "Do you feel like you failed?" I smiled. Failure is when you stop fighting. I'm still here. A few months later, I got a different kind of call, this time from Hollywood. A producer wanted to turn my story into a film. I laughed at first. "You want to make a movie out of my nightmare?" He said no. "Out of your victory." When Brian Banks hit theaters years later, and I sat there watching Aldous Hodge play me, my mother crying beside me, it was surreal. Seeing my pain on screen wasn't easy. But hearing the audience gasp when they realized I was innocent and cheer when I was freed reminded me that this wasn't just my story anymore. It was the story of every man and woman who's been wrongfully judged, silenced, or forgotten. After that, I made it my mission to fight for those who didn't have the voice or the proof or the luck that I did. I joined hands with the California Innocence Project, the same team that helped set me free, traveling across the country, talking to law students, police academies, and lawmakers about reforming the system. I wanted policies that protected the innocent. I wanted better forensic standards. I wanted accountability. One day, a young man approached me after a talk. His eyes were red. "They said I raped her too," he said quietly. "But I didn't. Nobody believes me." I looked him in the eye and said, "Then start with the truth. Don't stop until someone listens. And when you're free, because you will be free, you help the next man. That's how we win. Not through anger, but through legacy." Sometimes, I visit the prison where I once slept. The guards recognize me now. They shake my hand. "You made it out, Banks," they say. I walk those same corridors, The smell, the clang of the metal doors, the hollow echoes of footsteps. I stop in front of the cell that once held me. I look inside, at the bunk, the sink, the narrow window, and I whisper, "We did it." Life has a strange way of circling back. A few years later, I found myself mentoring young athletes again, not teaching them how to run faster or hit harder, but how to live wiser. I tell them, talent can take you places, but character keeps you there. Don't ever sign away your truth. Not for fear, not for pressure, not for anything. And every time I say it, I think of that terrified 17-year-old boy in an interrogation room, begging someone to believe him. If I could go back, I'd tell him this. They'll take your freedom, your dream, and your name, but they can't take your spirit. One day, you'll stand tall again. One day, they'll know. Today, when I look at my life, the talks, the book, the movie, the advocacy work, I realize that justice wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about reclaiming the narrative. For years, I was the boy who raped a girl. Now, I'm the man who proved the system wrong. And that title, that truth, is mine forever. The woman who lied about me lives somewhere far from here. I don't think about her much anymore. She lost everything she thought that lie would gain her. Money fades. Fame fades. But truth has a heartbeat. It doesn't die. As for me, I've made peace with my past. I've forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. Because I refuse to let bitterness be the last cell I live in. The last time I visited my old high school, they asked me to speak at the football field where it all began. The sun was setting behind the bleachers, the sky streaked orange and gold. I stood there, microphone in hand, looking at those kids, full of dreams, full of life. I said, sometimes life will knock you down so hard, it'll feel like you'll never get back up. But listen to me, the measure of a man isn't how many times he falls. It's how many times he rises when everyone says he can't. I was buried alive by a lie, but the truth dug me out. And now, every breath I take is proof that justice, though slow, always finds its way home.